Good morning. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Please give me a shout if you can. I'm not hearing myself, which is interesting. So please let me know if I'm... Good morning, Anita. Can you hear me, dear heart? Hello. Can anybody hear me? As I don't seem to be hearing myself. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. You can hear me. Okay. Well, that's good. Great. Then I did one show without being heard, and I want it to be the only one. Thank you. So thank you for showing up this morning. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I offer you my peace, my light, and my love, as always here on the Presence of Light talks. These talks come from my heart and my own personal experiences, some of which are in the moment. So a lot of it is not planned out in detail, and I allow the universe to flow through me. And I ask each of you to trust that universe to flow through you as well. And so today's talk is about your personal Independence Day. And that was brought about, of course, by this past week being celebrated in the United States as an Independence Day. It was their independence from a power that they felt was overbearing and constricting of their freedoms. And so many of us also feel that. We feel a constriction of our own abilities to speak our truth, to act in accordance with our hearts. And so it brought to mind this morning that each one of us need to declare our own personal Independence Day. When are we going to speak our truth, and when are we going to stand up to all these concepts and stories that we've been told since birth of how the world should act, how we should relate to each other, who should receive what and why is this world in such a chaotic state? If we're all saying that we're doing this for the good of the whole. So it brought me to the point where I started to think about my own personal journey. And I posted a saying that I wrote years ago after I came back from my near-death experience. And I'm going to see if I can read people. Okay, so if I scroll up, okay. Okay, good morning. Yeah, okay. So if I go up, I can see you. So the message was before I really fully understood what had happened to me when I died. And I knew that I came back into this body, but I really couldn't grasp the totality of what had happened, nor were there any real guides at the time to guide me, and other than my own divine guidance, which said stay away from those who are trying to put labels on everything, because they're doing that in order to further their own professional status. And I'm not discrediting anybody. This is the way the world works. This is how it's worked for thousands of years, is people seek information not for the good of the whole, to disseminate it for the good of the whole, but so that they can own it and make money from it, or charge somebody else for it, or use it as a commodity. And this lately has been bothering me personally. So when I came back, which was over 25 years ago, I sat and started to write a book of poetry, and that was my first thing. And as I was writing this book of poetry, I had not yet received the name Riverman, and I was just writing it as the person who came back into this body, banged up and broke and homeless and et cetera, and said, you know, I just need to put some words on paper. So these words came to me, and they became what I call a mantra for my life. And I want to read them to you because it's a very important message, I think, for all of us who are seeking to be who we truly are and live in our personal truth. So let me speak these to you and hear the resonance in my voice. Every day is an adventure. It can be your wildest fantasy or your worst nightmare. You choose. Your wildest fantasy is a limited thought, and your worst nightmare is just an illusion. Just allow those words to be breathed in and released. That little group of words changed my life because I began to see things from a totally different viewpoint or perspective. One in which I realized that victimhood and servitude was really was something that was so beneath who I was. And I wasn't thinking of myself as in being grand, but there was just this being that I am, that came back from the light, that agreed to come back into this body rather than being reincarnated. I wanted to be here now. I wanted to be here as part of this shift of consciousness. And it opened the doorway for me to see the truth of who I am and learn how to speak it. And so this is important right now in what we're going through in the world, because we look at countries that talk about freedom and democracy and all of these wonderful aspects, yet many of them are not portraying them. And the ones who are supposedly the claimed leaders of the world don't rank number one. And that's the truth. But it's all hidden underneath layers and layers of look what you've got. Look at all the toys you have. Look at this. Look at the stuff. Look at this stuff. But personal freedoms are being taken away from us every day. And that is not democracy. And that is certainly not in respect to who we are as sovereign beings. Interestingly, as I started this little journey this morning within myself, I thought back and I realized how the words came to me, a stranger in a strange land. And I remember there was an author, Heinlein, I think his name, that wrote a story, a book in the early 60s about, I believe it was an alien being who came to Earth, or was something that felt like a stranger in a strange land. And I thought, how appropriate, I don't remember the story, but how appropriate it is for today, how many of us are remembering lives and existences that are not what we would call human. They're humanoid, or they're in some other form, in some other planet, some other galaxy. And while many will say that's insanity, for those who say that, to them it is insanity. For others, it's their truth. So how do we come to this point in the world where we have such a diversity now? It isn't about just my country or your country, or my color or your color. The diversity is expanding to a conscious awareness of, we might even be from completely different star systems. How do we wrestle with that? How do we explain that? How do we own that? How do we tap into that? And this is what our independence is about celebrating who we are as we see ourselves, as the information comes into us, and owning it, not for the purpose of expressing it to say, hey, look at me, I'm somebody special, or look at over here, the ego. Let's not the ego, but to own it and say, what can I bring to this world? What greater purpose do I have? If I own my truth, if I tap into that, if I look at these wildest fantasies, which in the beginning, these were wild fantasies that I had, and then tap into them and let go of the fear, which is the worst nightmare. Let go of the fear of, what if I am? What if that's really what happened? And learn to trust within ourselves who we are, and begin to express it in small collective groups. Personally, person to person. I'm not a big fan of large groups, and I never will be, because there's a collective energy that if everybody is not in cohesive balance within themselves, it spreads into the larger field and disrupts and distorts that energy. So this is what we're all looking at, is how do I manifest my own personal truth and start to walk my talk. For me, the past week was speaking on a show. Stepping here and doing this was probably one of the first coming outs of me, so to speak, and realizing that there were more people like me than I ever imagined. And in that awareness of a larger group of people, although I will probably never meet them in person, to know that they too have had these amazing experiences that we would call supernatural or psychic, or we'll put all kinds of labels on them in order to allow the earthly mind to feel comfortable with them. But to know that I'm not alone. And part of my talks here are always about expressing to each of you that you are not alone. You have never been alone. You are part of an amazing life group that needs to fully embody itself and express itself and evolve into your full potential. So that was how I started my day. And I have a friend who I chatted with on text, and he says as he listens to me, he finds himself finding more truth within himself. And sometimes it's very unnerving. And yet at other times he realizes it was so simple and it was always there, but he couldn't see it. So this is what each of us are doing right now, is we're reaching out to each other and offering a hand or a word or a phrase or an invitation to truly learn who you are. And as I signed on this morning, on Humanity Healing was interesting. I think it was there was a quote that somebody had posted, and I want to read it to you because it's so apropos here. I know my own truth. I trust my own voice. I believe my own heart. I see with my own eyes. I speak with my own mind. And it's from, looks like Prophet Living or something, prolifeliving.com. But the words itself speak highly of what we need to start doing, is to begin to understand and know who we are within our deepest self. And so the other words I came across this morning were Janis Joplin. and all I could hear was, freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Nothing don't mean nothing, hun, if it ain't free. And, you know, I thought back to my early days in the 60s of being this rebel, how do we say, against the construct then. I grew up even in earlier childhood, but the sort of free love movement of the hippies and the flower power children, etc., gave me a vehicle to express myself against all who were horrified, and express my compassion and my love for life and for others. And eventually you come back into, you know, what we call 3D, or what I call 3D, and I got married, had children, lived a 3D life. My partner is still a 3D person. She's not going to change. We just celebrated 31 years of our first date on the 4th of July. And we never got married. We live together. We love each other as much as we possibly can. And we have to live within the constructs of the third dimension and the rules and regulations, but we don't need them. They don't contain us. We live as free souls. And she chooses to continue her journey on her third dimension as her third dimensional self, and doesn't understand a lot of what I say. But the love we have for each other, which is divine, carries us through that. And I have to learn how to bring my multidimensional self back into a focus that isn't disturbing for her and for her evolution. So this is what we're doing. We're evolving. And it's about independence. And independence is not about a country. It's not about swapping one power of rule for another power of rule. Independence is being not dependent on outside sources to tell us who we truly are. Doesn't mean they're not going to try to regulate us. Not going to mean they're going to stop trying to force us into little boxes and columns, and that's their world. That's what they've done for thousands of years. And there is no true freedom when there's a government who is not free within itself. And what was interesting, as I picked up, I'm looking at time, 20 past, I just grabbed a book off the shelf, and this is a book I have not read. It's called Power versus Force. And it was written, this one was in 1995, or the copyright is 1995. And it was recommended to me by a man who was in his 90s. And I was doing some work in his house, and we would have these long conversations of wisdom. And I just, the book is kind of broken in the middle. You can see the binding is broken. On the page is almost torn out of it. And it's called Democracy in the United States of America. And trust me, I don't plan this stuff. This just happens. But what was interesting, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but was in the Declaration of Independence, which the power of the entire United States government emanates from, it says, quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal," and I'm going to use that, all humans are created equal, "that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." And that's pretty much condensed as closely as possible. This is what the principles of democracy are. And this is what the principles of our own sovereignty are. And that's what they recognized. And that was their goal. But as we can see, the goal has fallen far, or the ball has fallen far from the goal. And we are the ones who have to pick that up by becoming sovereign to ourselves, to becoming independent, free thinkers once again, as they were when they realized they had an opportunity to make a better way for all. And we can do this. Each one of us can do this with our own deepening into ourselves and recognizing the truth of who we are and declaring your independence, saying, "I'm free. I am as the divine has created me. I am the emanation of all of creation. I seek only to be part of the whole, not separated, but together." So that's where I came to this morning, and wanted to share with you. So many of you are here from around the world, and little tidbits. Yes, Joanne. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And realize that when I looked at a few things, and I took a note, if I can find it here, I wrote it somewhere, and it was about, we talk about freedom, and we talk about the countries in the world and how many countries, and we talk about how many people are in the world. And some interesting facts were the world population right now is over 7.5 billion individuals, and I'll call them souls, because each one of them is a source of the light of the Creator, however you want to worship it. Okay, 7.5 billion lights in this world that have the opportunity to turn on and go within themselves and flip the switch and say, "I am," and tap into that and seek the truth of what that "I am" means for each one of them. So in China, which has the largest population, is 1.4 billion, and India is next with 1.3, and I think the United States comes in third with less than a 500 million. Anyway, these countries that we live in, the United States ranks 17th and 18th in personal freedom and economic freedom. So, America, wake up. Stop believing that you're the be-all and end-all of everything on the planet. Because when the studies are done and the numbers are crunched by your algorithms and your practices, you're ranking 17th and 18th in personal freedom and economic freedom, and it's not getting better. And I don't want to get political, because it has nothing to do with politics. It has all to do with each one of us declaring independence within ourselves, reclaiming the truth of who we are and living in accordance with that. There's nobody that gets up in the morning and cannot, on some level, appreciate something in life. No matter how much suffering you're going through, no matter how much pain you're in, no matter how great your losses are, yes, they're painful. When you pull the labels off of that, as I said in the beginning, your wildest fantasy is a limited thought, and your worst nightmare is just an illusion. So, I was like, Anita says, what are the top two? Actually, there's a tie, and there, if I can recall, it's Sweden. It's in the Northern European countries, and I don't have the things up, but it's not who you would think it is, but it's you can look it up, and basically, what information I give you, you can look it all up. I'm not making this up. These are factual. These are facts. It's just that we need to now start looking for facts which align with the truth of who we are, not the facts, the fake facts or the fake news that's now being fed to us, and fed to us from all sources. And this is, I have to be very careful what I post now as to credibility. And each one of us have to take a deeper step into credibility and discernment of, how does that make me feel when I read that? How does that look if I was going to create a whole new world around this principle? These are things we can ask ourselves. Try it on. Try everything on. It's like buying new clothes. Let's not be the emperor. What was the story about the emperor and his new clothes? They were all horrible, but he was made to believe that they were beautiful. This is what we've been told. We've been told stories after stories after stories after stories, only through an interpretation which kept us enslaved to a small group of humans who benefited. While each of us, we benefited, but limitedly, with limitations. There's no limitations now. The energies that we're receiving, that many of us are helping to anchor into the earth through grid work, through presence, even just some people's presence. Each of you, your presence, following your heart, is anchoring the energy and opening the fields and the floodgates for each one of us to manifest this to a point of conscious evolution. And in spite of what everybody is doing to continue to contain this paradigm in the shape it's in, they cannot succeed. It's impossible. And I say that from my truth, from where I see it on a much higher level of who I am. And you don't have to believe me, just keep watching. Stay tuned. Tap into what's happening that's for the good of the whole. Support it in whatever way you can. Find people that align with your heart, people that you can trust, people that are not using you, people that are not trying to get something from you. You know, you all know this. This isn't kindergarten anymore. This is real life. And we're the ones who came here to shift and change this. Yes, money is just a tool. Yes, and it is all these. Again, there's many tools that we have been presented with as little trinkets to say, "Ooh, look at this! Look, I've got cookies. I've got candy. I've got gold. I have." They tempt us. They entrain our minds. They dangle all of these carrots in front of us. And we, like the rabbits, go and nibble and nibble and nibble and and breed and breed and breed. And life is fine. Life is one. But in truth, we've lost our sovereignty. We've lost the truth of who we are, which are we are amazing, powerful beings beyond what anybody has discovered yet. We're just beginning. So, illusions, illusions, using the grand illusions. Let them go. The minute they appear, let them go. How can we be free when, okay, so that was an answer to that. Thank you. And thank you for joining in. I'm going to try to, in the future, to tap into some of what you're saying. Your husband and son both passing away is no illusion. And no, I'm not going to hit you with a brick. But what I'm going to say to you is that your husband and your son still exist because they are light. We're light, they are light. You can contact them. You can speak with them. You can call them into your heart. And you can hit me with a brick if I lie. And that's my story. Be blessed. Be loved. Forgive yourselves. And look within to see who you truly are. And please express that in loving and kind ways. I love you. I thank you. I bless you with my breath, knowing full well that each of us, helping each other, can erase all the illusions. And with that, I'm complete, and I thank you all for showing up. And I don't expect all of you to agree with me, but hold those thoughts and see where you disagree. Find those places where you disagree and where you've been triggered into anger or fear or whatever you've been triggered in, whatever energy comes up for you. That's the key, is because that has hit the wall of your truth. Own your truth. Be it. And with that, I'm complete. Okay, and we'll see you next week. Blessings. Thank you, Humanity Healing, for allowing me to share here, and many blessings to all. Bye-bye.